What if the biggest change in your financial life comes from understanding that Bitcoin isn't just another investment, but a complete mindset shift? In this episode, I talk with Immo Babic, who shares his honest story of diving into Bitcoin in 2017, holding through a brutal crash to eventually finding a mission that shaped his work at Europe's fastest growing Bitcoin company. His experience shows that conviction and understanding grows over time, not overnight, and that's a lesson that anyone can apply. And stick around because Immo reveals how banks are quietly becoming part of the Bitcoin revolution, often without realizing it. All right, let's dive in. All right, Immo Babic, welcome to Bitcoin for Millennials.
Thank you, Bram.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. This was some time coming. I think we've been in touch before, but I'm happy you're here. I think it's really exciting what you guys are building with Relay, and I'm interested to hear where you're at, but also, of course, about your personal journey. You started working in crypto. I think it was a Bitpanda, right, before joining Relay.
Yes.
And Bitpanda is obviously Bitcoin and crypto. Relay is Bitcoin only. And yeah, I was just wondering, like, how did your understanding of Bitcoin evolve? From the time that you discovered it and also went deep in crypto, and yeah, what finally clicked for you when you decided, it should be Bitcoin only?
Yeah. So I actually jumped into Bitcoin very recklessly and carelessly straight away when I understood it. So it was 2017, late 2017. And I have heard about Bitcoin before, like years before, but I just laughed it off and ignored it, and really it just sort of stayed somewhere in a corner of my mind, but I never really looked into it anymore. And then I decided to start working in startups, to move from sort of agencies and corporates into a startup world, which was something that always intrigued me. And that's when Bitpanda came along. And I looked at the company, doing my research for the interviews, and obviously that's when I also really properly looked into Bitcoin, just to really understand. All right, so okay, I heard of Bitcoin. Now there's this company. They seem, very ambitious. I wanted to understand a little bit more. Why would you build a business around Bitcoin? And that's sort of when my research started. And I remember pretty much straight away. I think I don't remember exactly what I read or what I've seen, but I remember they was very fast to me, like, oh shit, I should get into it as an investment as well. And that's what I did very fast without having any idea really of, obviously I now have years and years of knowledge, but at that time it was really just like, this seems like the future, looks very interesting. Let's just ape into it, basically. And that's basically what happened. And then I got a job at Bitpanda, and then obviously that really started to build my conviction. Because, well, also just to sort of put it in a sort of a timeline, 2017, late 2017 and 2018, it really wasn't the same as it is now, where you have, Bitcoin only, and the rest is just crypto shit. That's really wasn't the attitude then. It was very much like these companies that are offering cryptocurrencies are the new, the new up and coming sort of system. They are the ones to take down the fiat system, the banks and everything. So it was very much sort of us as all of us against the banking world and the fiat world. That was very much the attitude. There was obviously Bitcoin was the star even then, but there really wasn't this I would say anonymity towards Ethereum or anything else. It was just basically grouped together. And that was actually Bitpanda at the time as well. They didn't have that many cryptocurrencies on offer as they do now. I think if you will take a look now, they I think have like hundreds that you can buy there. So spending time there obviously really helped me with the conviction, and being close to the source always helps, I think. And obviously you learn about everything much more, and then you understand how normies would perceive an event, and then how you perceive the event because you're an insider, and you really understand what is actually going on, what is the media reporting, and how that's actually not true because you know that it's not true because you work in it. But then Bitpanda started going through some changes. They are very ambitious. Obviously now they're Austria's unicorn. They're one of the biggest companies in Europe when it comes to crypto. hundreds of employees, billions in revenue and stuff like that. But they started changing, and it just became all about this big idea that they had, and they pretty much wanted to become an everything money app, which is where they're heading now. They're not quite there yet, but they already offer precious metals, they offer, crypto, stocks, ETFs, everything basically. And lots of people, sort of true believers, started leaving them, and they just said, this is not really what I believe in anymore, and they just moved on to other projects, namely developers who are doing it a lot. And I really fell in love with the industry. But then I understood after I moved on that I do want to work still in this industry, but I don't want to work for a company that offers everything. I really just want to focus on Bitcoin, because that felt and seemed like that's the only honest, or I would say like morally correct way to do this. When you really understand, how things like Dogecoin work, and how people lose all their money and it's just a gamble. It really puts things into perspective, and you understand that, all right, well, if it's all about just money, then obviously going to Coinbase and companies like that is the next step. That's what you would want to do. But then if you want to build something that you believe in, and be sort of mission driven, which I really believe in. I think I'm a big fan of mission driven companies, and companies that often say no to great opportunities because they believe in something so much. And that's why I just basically said no to a lot of offers. At one point, I was close to, for example, joining OpenSea, which I had no idea about. That's how I discovered NFTs during this interview process. I'm like, all right, I don't understand any of that, so no. And then along came Relay after a year where I spent in another company, and it just immediately clicked. They were looking for someone who has done it before in terms of growing a small startup into a bigger one. And I was looking for a Bitcoin-only company that only wants to remain Bitcoin-only. Met up with Julian, the CEO and co-founder, and we just clicked, and been there for over 4 years now. So that's pretty much sort of my journey. I cannot really pinpoint to you like when it clicked for me, because like I said, I really jumped into straight away recklessly, and then the conviction was built along the way. I actually remember like in 2000, if you remember in 2017, it went up to like 20K, and it crashed early 2018. I was in a red for a very long time when it comes to Bitcoin. The only reason at the time why I didn't sell wasn't the conviction, because I didn't have it yet. It wasn't so strong. It was only because I didn't want to lose that money. So I'm like, there's no way I'm selling at this price point, because I just lose all that money that I put into it. Yeah. And that sort of carried me over. And I also then my conviction started becoming stronger, and then I didn't care about the price anymore. Yeah. So it was sort of, I would say, this organic way of getting there. And I do believe that there isn't just one moment where it's like, aha, it clicked. And that's why when I have conversations on LinkedIn with someone, or I meet someone who tells me about Bitcoin, and they tell me, they basically tell me some FUD. And I can already say that, and I always try to tell them, look, for me, it took years. So I know that it takes years to really understand Bitcoin. So I can tell you honestly, I know you think that you researched it, but I'm telling you that you haven't researched it well enough. You need to spend more time with it to fully understand what it really is, so that you move beyond, oh, this is a way to get super rich, that you move beyond the numbers, and you understand what it actually is. Yeah. And that takes time. And yes, obviously, reading great books, listening to great podcasts such as yours does help. But I don't think there is just one special moment where it's like, oh, listen to this episode with Bram, and it clicked for me straight away in that podcast. I think everything, it's like pushes you closer, and then it's the accumulation of these tiny little facts that sort of pushes you over the edge then.
Bitcoin custody is evolving, and OnRamp is leading this change with multi-institution custody, eliminating single points of failure. Instead of relying on one institution, OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a cold storage multi-sig vault backed by 3 independent custodians, where no single party can move your funds alone, providing an unprecedented level of security. Your assets are protected by a 100 million Lloyd's of London insurance policy, with all transactions fully auditable on-chain and only executed at your direction. This means complete transparency and control over your assets at all time. Beyond custody, OnRamp provides comprehensive Bitcoin services that include trading, lending, inheritance planning, and IRAs. You can view them as your private Bitcoin banking partner tailored to your wealth preservation goals. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or an experienced holder, OnRamp's approach helps you secure your generational wealth with unmatched security and peace of mind. You can sign up at onrampbitcoin.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to receive $150 in Bitcoin after your first deposit. If you first want to learn more, you can also book a free consultation via their website to speak with one of their Bitcoin custody experts. Tell them you came through me, and they'll take extra good care of you. My American friends, I've got something for you. If you're into Bitcoin, you want to grow your stack in any way possible. What if you could do it effortlessly just by spending your fiat? The Gemini Bitcoin credit card is designed to help you do just that by giving you instant Bitcoin rewards on every purchase. Just use it like any other credit card and earn back up to 4% on transportation, 3% on dining, 2% on groceries, and 1% on everything else. There are no annual fees for this card and no exchange fees to receive your Bitcoin rewards. Sign up to get your limited edition Bitcoin Orange credit card and earn a $200 Bitcoin bonus when you spend $3,000 in the first 90 days. You can find more information and terms in the description below or go to gemini.com/Bram to sign up today and start stacking effortlessly. That's gemini.com/Bram. Yeah. Oh man, so many things to pull on. I think you are totally right in a sense that I also cannot really retrace my steps back to like, oh yeah, then I thought this and then I understood this and then I went there and then like it is a gradual thing. And then at one point you're just like, yeah, this is just it. But this is also very different for different people, right? Also depending on their experiences. I mean, I was also into crypto also in the 2017 era. I mean, I think I funded 10 or 12 neo banks, right? That never saw the light of day. And I think you need, and I got scammed along the way and whatever. And like, you got a shitcoin before you Bitcoin. Like you have to experience that. You have to sell your Bitcoin early or be scared when it goes down and then you sell, right? Or like when you buy and then it goes down and then you're like, am I the only person in the world where it goes down after I bought it? Like, it's just all that stuff. What I'm taking out of what you said, I thought it was interesting is, it went down and you were like, oh, I don't want to lose this money. Maybe, but please confirm. When it went back up, this is something that I've heard before about a lot of people that saw like Bitcoin go up, then it went like 80% down, but then it didn't die, right? And for a lot of people, that was kind of like a trigger moment where they just realized, okay, there is something different with regard to Bitcoin and all these other ICOs or NFTs or at whatever period of time you came into crypto.
Yeah.
That is why it's something I need to pay attention to, basically. And like what you said, like, oh, I don't want to lose this money, I'll just stay in the red. That is what I hear from people that are still into crypto.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, before NFTs, especially in 2017, 18, there were the ICOs, that was all the rage. But I think from what really helped me, and I wonder if there would have been a different outcome, when everything crashed, it was pretty much like it's a game over scenario. Like, the media buried it, and when you're still new to it and you're new to the industry, that's often like, all right, I'm not sure what's happening right now. But because I was working in the industry, obviously that helped me really to not panic too much and be like, okay, well, we're still here. Our users are still buying and trading, and the industry is not really going anywhere. And you also hear that, this project is building, this like development is happening. So it's not something the media would report. And that's why that was this important step that I was actually on the inside, and I could see that we're actually not, the price fell, but it doesn't make any difference to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is still going strong and developing. There was also the block size wars that started after the crash. So in 2018, it really kicked off. And that's something that really wasn't reported by the general media, but it was a huge topic in the Bitcoin world. So being in there, I think, really helped me not to make a mistake of like just exiting. And I would say probably, had I not been working in the industry and this crash happens, I don't know what are the odds of me actually just cashing out and be like, you know what, F this, I lost so much money, I'm just going to move on.
Yeah.
So for me, it helped. A funny anecdote. In the early days, I remember I went for lunch and I exited the Bitpanda building. And this was literally like very early 2018. And I exited the Bitpanda building and cops were waiting there. And they asked me like, are you from Bitpanda? Is this the Bitpanda building? And I said, yes. And they just went upstairs and I had no idea what's happening. I thought like, oh my God, we are being shut down. Like, have I been working all this time for some sort of a scam? Is this whole thing a scam? But turns out, like, we were panicked. But turns out somebody just called a bomb threat somewhere in a school in Vienna, and they were demanding money from Bitpanda to basically pay so they don't blow up the school, which is obviously a scam.
Whoa. Yeah.
We had later found that we actually had lots of these threats happening on a regular basis. So our support team would be dealing with that of like, hey, we're going to blow up this if you don't send us X amount of Bitcoin or something like that. And obviously we have to report it to the police. So that's why the police came. But there were these moments where just like, you're not quite sure what you're part of, you know. And then obviously years later, you understand that those were the early days. And actually now still being part of the industry in 2025, comparing it to the overall atmosphere of the 17, 18 years, we've gone such a long way, like in everything, even how the media now talks about Bitcoin. Yes, there's still a lot of FUD, but you cannot compare it. Like back then in 2018, you were still a crazy person if you were taking Bitcoin seriously in any way. And it was really a smaller industry as well. That's pretty much when Binance started as well. You know, Binance wasn't around before. Now they're a massive company. So yeah, it was quite a journey. Yeah, I can talk about that for hours, but.
Well, so I really like that arc because I think I have a similar one to then eventually end up with Bitcoin only. If today, you know, people that know you or that come across you know that you've been into crypto and now Bitcoin. If they ask you what is Bitcoin and why should I care, what is your answer today?
I try to. And this is something we do at Relay as well. We really don't go down the technical path, and we don't really try to explain, sort of how a Bitcoiner would explain what Bitcoin is. I try to approach it from an angle that Bitcoin is like a savings technology, or like it's the best savings account you can have. And I try to position the crypto and more like the gambling part, where you may get lucky. Even though I really believe that now the chances of you being lucky are really low, but in like the 2018 probably and 2019, you could still get lucky with certain projects. But the question is, how do you find that project? And then it's still the luck factor. You know, at what point do you enter that scheme, basically? So I would really just call it a casino. And I tell, if people ask that, look, I'm not saying don't do it, because I can understand the desperation of people, and I can understand that everybody wants to make money because the current system is not helping you. But I just want them to understand that this is pure gamble. It's like going to a casino and going to the blackjack table or a roulette or something like that. It's not what Bitcoin is. And I always try to approach Bitcoin as it's something that really helps you save money for the long term. And I want to change their mind about, it's not about getting rich fast. Don't expect that you will get into Bitcoin and you will, over 2 weeks become a millionaire. That will not happen, but it will help you to protect your money in the long term. So I try to reframe it from a more, like, to remove the hype, really. Because I think a lot of people, especially newbies who have no clue about crypto, they group it all together. And the main reason, in my opinion and in my experience, why people come to it is because the current financial products that are there, they understood that they're not doing anything for them. So then they go, oh, I should try crypto because I heard that people can get very rich from it. And I try to change their mind about it. So I think it's more not really a technical part, but more about like understanding what you're after and how Bitcoin can help you when you're going, if you want to make money very fast, Bitcoin is not a good idea. But if you want to save up for a house, I think Bitcoin is a great solution for it. And obviously, patience is required.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that even in 2025, the crypto narrative is still so strong. I always think that this is a remnant of like 2017, 18, where like certain fundamental ideas around crypto and Bitcoin have just been cemented in media, and that is kind of like what people listen to, or where they get their knowledge. With Bitpanda, I think also in that time it was probably quite easy to market. Like it was just a new thing, and a lot of people were like jumping in. Relay is of course just Bitcoin only. Do you think it's easier or more difficult to focus on, broader short-term crypto users, or these long-term Bitcoin users, as you just mentioned, right? Like the gambling and fast money sounds fun, and saving and being diligent and thinking about the future sounds boring, right? So they're kind of opposed to each other.
Yeah, I think it is easier to be focused on Bitcoin only. Also because what companies really want is return customers. You want loyalty as well. And crypto is very much not a long-term game. It's a very short-term game. And then you basically have to market every time a new project. There was a time where really Dogecoin had its moment, and it was all about Dogecoin. But then that probably lasts like a month, and then you need to move on to another thing, and then another thing. And I don't even know sort of what really they're marketing right now. And if you are working for like a shitcoin casino, how do you attract people? We always need to find the next best thing and what the market really wants. While with Bitcoin, you're actually allowed to build for the long term when it comes to marketing as well. You really are starting with the foundations to make sure that there is good education, and you start building on top of it. So you really try to get the people who are interested in learning, and they perhaps gone through the journey of getting to Bitcoin. And I'm sure you have the same experience, but what I find is that there's two kinds of people really that come to Bitcoin. There is a very small group that sort of gets it straight away, and they really didn't try anything else, but they had some personal recommendation from someone, a son, brother, father, whatever it was, and they just really got convinced that, all right, Bitcoin is great and I will invest in it. That is a small part of it. The bigger part is people who actually come from the crypto world, and they started, I don't know, with Ethereum or Dogecoin or whatever it was, and then they either burned themselves, and then they decided, all right, so what did I do wrong? It was probably that I didn't focus on Bitcoin. Let me try that. But there's also obviously people who burn themselves and never come back. But I also think that there is another group where people actually go into crypto and they do make it. And then what you do with all that money? All right, let's say you buy yourself a flat or a house. But what do you do with the leftover if you have? Bitcoin is a great solution for these people too. So I think the journey always leads in the end towards Bitcoin. Like if you don't have money, eventually you arrive at Bitcoin. If you do have money, then you will put it to places, but Bitcoin is going to be one of those places as well.
Yeah. And so how hard is it growing a Bitcoin only company then? I mean, like the crypto apps and platforms, they kind of grow on these hype cycles or hype moments.
Yeah.
And like you said, they constantly have to promote another new token that's launching, or some sort of, offer, or, whatever type of thing. And of course, they're doing that because, you have this attention economy, right? It is also fleeting what people are consuming, right? Like it's all very short term and quick, like content and stuff. How do you cut through that noise? Because with Bitcoin, there isn't really a constant newness or something, right? There isn't really something that you like every week. There's this new big thing or whatever. No, it's just structural education and making sure a platform just works as it works, etc. Yeah, how do you look at that?
I think when it comes to all the crypto casinos, you're absolutely right. First of all, there's also more money. At a Bitcoin only company, And when you start out, there really isn't that much money. And overall, you really only have one asset. So if you have a platform that has, I don't know, 200, obviously sooner or later you will find what is hyped right now so that you will make your money there. But with Bitcoin, it's really about understanding that what Bitcoiners like and what is that they gravitate towards. And eventually everybody becomes a Bitcoiner once they sort of go down this, this rabbit hole. So what you really need to present yourself as somebody that is stable, somebody you can trust, somebody that stands for something, and has a personality. I think we tried to do that at Relay, and we really wanted to build a brand. We didn't want to sort of chase hypes. We wanted to make sure that we are seen as a brand that is stable, that is standing for something, Bitcoin only, Swiss made, self-custody. And we really try to sort of convince people with repeated messaging that we're not going anywhere. We believe in these things, just like you believe in these things, and we're not going to change for anything. And it's how you communicate. So we have huge success on X with our account. That has been very helpful for us to really be part of the community and understand, what the community is into, what they sort of resonate with, and that was a huge part of us, the community work itself. So obviously how you use memes, that you speak the same language, that you sort of poke fun at the right people. All this sort of is part of, you need to understand the culture. And that really only works if you get people from the culture. So most of our employees, and pretty much all our employees in the early days, were Bitcoiners. And you do need that to be able to speak to Bitcoiners. In marketing, we are talking to Bitcoiners most of the time. Now, obviously, as we have grown, we want to talk to non-Bitcoiners and we want to convince them. But in the early days, it was all about, all right, we need to make sure that we speak their language and they understand that we are Bitcoiners as well. And I think we have achieved that. But it's a long-term game. So there's no quick wins in it. It takes creating lots of educational content, building on social media, working with the community and growing that community. This is all, this is the bread and butter of marketing, I would say. The short wins are if you have a lot of money and you just throw advertising money at everything. That is the easy solution. But to actually build something is a lot of years. And I think we are now in a position that people know what to expect of Relay. They know us. They know what we stand for and who we are. And that was something that I'm very proud of, that we managed to build it. And it's still not finalized. This is still not the final form of Relay as a brand. But we have gone, I think, on a very good journey. We get imitated a lot by lots of companies, which is always nice to see when people sort of I had a couple of months ago, I had some Bitcoin app from India has very blatantly stolen our creative that we had for an advertising campaign. And I sort of took it as a very nice compliment, because clearly it must be good if other people are stealing it. So yeah, it's hard work, but it's, as they say, it's an honest day's of work.
If you want to self-custody your Bitcoin stack, I recommend the Blockstream Jade Plus. I've been using this premium Bitcoin-only hardware wallet for a few months now, and I love its design and ease of use. What makes it stand out is its open source hardware and software, and Blockstream's unique genuine check, which makes sure that your device is authentic. No backdoors or compromises. You can connect with the Jade Plus however you want, Bluetooth, USB-C, or you can go fully air-gapped with its built-in camera for cable-free QR transactions. The metal case feels solid and the color screen is easy to read, and it connects with your favorite Bitcoin apps like Blockstream Green, Sparrow, and Electrum. Get your Jade Plus today at store.blockstream.com and use code BRAM to get 10% of your entire order. Let's talk about something a lot of people don't think about before it's too late. Where are you storing your Bitcoin seed words? Are they truly secure? I found my solution with Stampseed. They now offer both 12 and 24 word titanium plates, so whether you're securing a hardware wallet or a multi-sig setup, they got you covered. Your seed phrase gets permanently stamped into pure titanium that withstands fire, survives water, and lasts for generations. Unlike shallow etching methods, Stamp Seed's patented tools help you to deeply stamp every letter for permanent readability, protecting your financial legacy. Their new kit includes test pieces for practice and is compatible with both the 12 and the 24 word plates. Paper seed phrases are a disaster waiting to happen. Secure your Bitcoin with Stamp Seed for decades to come. Go to stampseed.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, for 15% of your order. It's funny, right? Because it also doesn't really matter, like if they work for Bitcoin and you work for, if they work for Bitcoin, they also work for you. And like you said, it's kind of like a validation of your approach of how you then talk about Bitcoin. I really like that. Like that is such a different mindset than like fiat money zero sum game type mindset, where it's like, someone wins and another, when someone wins, another person loses. But here it's this cooperative game. Basically, you are battling for attention or something, right? But eventually, it's all a contribution to Bitcoin. I think maybe one more question about how you approach that education part. Like I once talked to a guy who was quite rich, and we talked about Bitcoin, and at one point he said like, okay, so but if I hold my Bitcoin in self-custody, we were talking about that when he puts money in the bank, it's not really his anymore, and there's no control, it's not really your property, etc. So I explained like, this is what Bitcoin allows you to do, and this is also what Relay does, right? It's non-custodial, so you offer all these services, but a user is fully in control. So there's differences with custodial wallets and non-custodial. So custodial, you could say there's a backup, right? There's a login, there's a password reset, whatever, with a service provider. But with a non-custodial wallet, it's not. And the biggest question he had, what scared him the most was, okay, so I'm fully responsible for holding my own money. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay, that's scary. I'm like, yeah, but what's also scary, that you're not in control. And I think taking this step for people to understand that they're abstract, or like they're outsourcing certain responsibility of the protection or storage of their, I do air quotes, like protection, storage of their wealth. And when they understand on one side that by outsourcing that, they don't have to think about it, but they also give the opportunity to a bank to actually fuel their own business model, right? Like that's the whole idea of a bank. And then when you can be your own bank, you get all that responsibility put on you. So I think explaining Bitcoin on one side is difficult, but you actually offering a non-custodial wallet is like an extra layer of explaining, okay, you can buy Bitcoin with us, and you have this app, and it's nice to interact and all these things, but we are not responsible for that. Like how do you approach crossing that bridge? Because I think for a lot of people, this is probably top 3 thing they have against adopting Bitcoin, just taking on all that responsibility, basically.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's if you're coming from the normie world, it is very scary to suddenly be like, what? I am fully responsible for all of this. And I get it. When I started, with my very first hardware wallet, I was like, okay. But now I can send transactions, and I don't really. It's the same as if I would send it in a banking app. So it's more just about getting used to it. But I think the biggest helper in all this, in sort of the whole idea of self-custody, is actually the wider market and the fiat world. So, for example, one of our best days as a Relay, we had when the Swiss bank Credit Suisse went under, I think 2 years ago. They basically went bankrupt, and we had a record number of downloads, record number of new users, because they understood that my money is actually not safe in a bank. That the bank can basically just go under any moment and take the money with you as well. So that was really good. Another great day for us was when FTX went under, who don't offer self-custody, obviously. So these sort of examples really help. And then I think the other point that really helps is just having an easy product that is very easy to sort of use. And that's what Relay is with our self-custody app. You don't really we don't try to scare you into you need to be responsible. It's more about you download the app, you buy some Bitcoin, and then we remind you that make sure that you save these 12 words in a safe place, that you have access to it. We try to explain why, and of course there's levels to how much our users really understand it. And I think this is something that luckily, so I think self-custody is a really big problem if a millionaire comes to you and be like, hey, I want to buy 200 Bitcoin and I want to self-custody it. That is a scary notion, I think, because it's like, that's a lot of money, and now I need to be fully responsible for it, while with my other assets, the bank takes care of it, or my asset manager takes care of it, or whatever. But I think this is quite a unique situation. It doesn't happen that often. Usually what happens is that people come and they buy like 100 euros worth of Bitcoin, 200, like really small amounts. And they do it then over time. So as their conviction and understanding grows, so does the amount of money they have in Bitcoin. Rarely do they jump straight away with everything they own. So actually, from the moment they become a Relay user, then we always can educate them with the newsletter within the app, and it happens sort of naturally, where again, there is no specific point that sort of breaks the camel's back and convinces them that, self-custody is great. It sort of happens as they use Relay and as they learn more. And then suddenly, they have 5 or 10,000 euros in it, and that's when they move to a hardware wallet as well, because they understand that while a mobile wallet is safe, obviously there's levels to the safety you can have when it comes to self-custody. So again, it's not really one single point. It's more this organic being involved just with self-custodial app in itself, and you learn. I think obviously if you jump straight away in, then that can be very scary, and then we cannot just convince you straight away. It doesn't really work that way. I think it's a lot of touch points, a lot of messaging that is consistent. And we always repeat, mostly when it comes to Relay, we always market ourselves around 3 things. One is that we are Bitcoin only, which is a huge deal. And also people really appreciate it because it's simple. You just come to us, there's only Bitcoin here, nothing else. You don't need to worry about all the other assets and ETFs and some platforms even have like 3 different Bitcoins. Simplicity. There is only Bitcoin here. Yeah. So that's one angle. Then self-custody is something that we repeat all the time, that we have no access to your money. We can never take your money away from you. Even if something happens to Relay and we're not around anymore, you can still access all the Bitcoin that you have in your Relay self-custodial wallet. Again, that's something that we try to repeat everywhere in support articles, in our podcasts, everywhere. It's always just a mention. And then obviously we have some deeper pieces that really explain the benefits of it and comparisons and deepen the understanding. And the final one is that we are Swiss, which is a huge benefit. Like really being a company from Switzerland, being Swiss and Swiss made is such a trust signal. People always associate Switzerland with money and banks and safety and overall, if you're an app from, I don't know, Lithuania and you have an app from Switzerland, you will always go with the app from Switzerland, in my opinion, because somehow there's just this subconscious trust in just the Swissness of it. And again, people really value that because it is something that they believe is a trust signal. So we really rely on these pillars when we communicate, and we repeat them many, many times. When Julian or Adam or I are on stage somewhere, we talk about all these points always. It's the repeated messaging. You just keep saying it and saying it and saying it until everybody understands it.
So now that you have spent some time in this space and Bitcoin only, and also working with getting regulated in Europe and all these things, how has your perception of traditional banking changed since you got involved with Bitcoin? Like, how do you look at legacy banks or financial services now? Because I want to ask, because what you just said, I thought it was interesting in the sense that you say, like, we can never touch your funds. It's so funny that a bank would never say that, because it's not true. It's not true, right? these are these little things that I really like about Bitcoin, that it's so opposed to this traditional system, and that there's actually an opportunity to say what you just said.
Yeah.
And that it's so weird that it's not true for what people think is a bank that stores your money and keeps it safe.
That's a good point, actually. I was hoping that we can talk about this because I had an epiphany last week. We were in Plan B Lugano, the Bitcoin conference, which was great. I really like it. It's one of the best conferences, in my opinion, in Europe. But what was very interesting to me is that this was the first year that I went to conferences and I really noticed banks being much more present. So we were, for example, running ads around the city of Lugano, around the conference center, but also banks were running ads. Banks were having panels and they had talks at the Bitcoin conference. And that's when it occurred to me. I was sort of thinking about it, and I have a controversial opinion on banks and their role when it comes to Bitcoin. Maybe it's controversial, I don't know. But so when I started in the early days, in 2017, 2018, the idea very much was, and I think even up until recently, the idea was that we are going to replace the banking system. You know, banks down, Bitcoin up, and all these sort of things. But now I see it a little bit differently. And keep in mind, I work in Bitcoin, so my ultimate goal is adoption, of how adoption can be achieved. And I think my theory is now that the adoption is actually not going to happen where we replace the old system. I think it's happening now that we're infiltrating the old system. And it will be the old system, actually, the banking system and the fiat system that will help us achieve great adoption, like really mass adoption. And banks will be one of the tools, the way we will achieve it. Because actually banks are now getting heavily involved in Bitcoin. They're offering Bitcoin products. A lot of the neobanks, you can now buy Bitcoin. The bigger banks in Switzerland, they're offering custody. They offer all sorts of Bitcoin products. They offer loans against your Bitcoin and all these sort of things. It's really happening now. And I think this is only going to speed up. And it kind of makes sense because you will not be able to replace, as brilliant as Bitcoin is, you cannot replace the banking system. It cannot be just like, we'll kill it and we'll take over. I think basically we are slowly infiltrating them, making them into Bitcoiners. And that this will actually, I think, transform the whole banking systems in the long term. And of course, because everybody has a bank account, everybody trusts banks. Now, I'm speaking about the general public here. They trust banks. So that is a lot easier sell into Bitcoin if your bank is offering it to you. So I think and now we have the Wall Street involved as well. So really, we have sort of taken over very slowly the traditional financial world. And I think this is the path to victory. And then you can get into Bitcoin in the future. Let's say you just go to your local bank and they offer you some Bitcoin that you can buy there. They will offer you custody. They will custody your Bitcoin for you. You are 60 years old, you don't know anything, and you say, yeah, great, I'll do that. But I think if you are, maybe 30 or 40-year-old, you're much more tech savvy and digital, and you really value your privacy more. For you, it's going to be self-custody. So I think Bitcoin is going to have different use cases for different people. And we see it now as well with our clients. We have some clients that would actually prefer custody from a trusted partner. A bank would be a great solution for them because they trust their bank. And if my bank can keep my Bitcoin, I'm all for it. I'm not saying that that's obviously, the best solution, but I think we have to understand that there is no one way, because we are very diverse as people. We come from different backgrounds. We have different financial backgrounds and different amounts of money that we have. So convincing an old school millionaire that you should go with self-custody is going to be really hard sell. But convincing somebody who is younger or more digitally savvy, or overall is just not trusting banks at all, that's also fine. Go with self-custody. I think overall, as the industry, my thinking is we probably need to embrace this a bit more, because it doesn't mean that just because if banks get involved that it's the game over and now banks basically have ruined Bitcoin. I see it the other way. I feel it like there's just another way for us to win. And once we are everywhere, then we start changing the fiat world, and then ultimately Bitcoin is going to win. And maybe 100 years from now, everybody will have self-custody. That might very much be it, but I don't think that suddenly we're going to, tear down the old fiat system and we're going to build one on Bitcoin. I think that is a bit naive to expect. Well, it's a nice dream, and obviously it's an honorable mission, but we need to be realistic of. We have these structures that have been around for many, many, many years, hundreds of years, the banking system. So I think this is a much, much nicer way of beating someone, because you're also not destroying something, you're changing something. So I prefer this messaging much more than tearing down the banking system and the fiat world. I prefer it. No, we're going to change them. We're going to make them better.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting subject, because I do think we agree, and a lot of people would agree, that banks are predatory institutions that use the fiat money system and all these things, right? People are going to try to play these fiat games on Bitcoin, right? Like there's going to be banks that are saying like, oh, we have Bitcoin custody, and then I don't know, they lose the keys or their partner blows up or whatever. Like shit is going to happen, and people are going to lose their Bitcoin, and a lot of banks are going to fumble. But for me, that's kind of what the Trojan horse is like.
Exactly.
They're adopting it for the greed, or they think like, oh, this is how we stay relevant and still cater to people that want to have digital assets, right, and stuff like that. But because they don't really understand it, their incentive is to actually not fully understand it, right? Or they'll blow up their whole own paradigm, basically. That for me is the Trojan horse. Like I don't think there can be attempts at co-opting and stuff like that, however you want to define co-opting, by the way. But just like, I just call it playing the fiat money games. But they will regret it over time. But this takes time, as you said, right? Like this doesn't happen tomorrow. We also want to have time for them to fuck up on the Bitcoin standard, if that makes sense. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. And I agree with you. This is a longer, you have to zoom out more. This is like a longer time frame. Yes. And I think we can still be against banks and all that stuff that's going on there. But Bitcoin is also for the enemies. Like let them adopt it, right? Let them try to play all these perverse games on Bitcoin, and they will get wrecked, which is great. But it takes time for that to play out. Yeah, what do you think of that?
Banks are a little bit like, the term useful idiot. It's basically, like, you can still be against banks. And I mean, they're into Bitcoin for a very simple reason. They have now understood that they can make money out of it. That's why Wall Street has embraced it. That's why, we have the ETFs. It's as simple as that. They understood that there is money to be made. That's why all the banks are going to be jumping into it as well. And I think, yes, they will make mistakes. Yes, people will lose some money. But this is also going to be a great way of, because there are banks and banks. There are some banks that are really shitty, some banks that maybe, while they're in a corrupt system, but they're trying to have some sort of, do things the right way. So I think Bitcoin will also sort of get rid of a lot of these banks in the long term. And there will be maybe a few left. But I overall think that we're going to move into a world where you will maybe enter Bitcoin also through your bank, but then you will always understand that there is a final level. Like the meme of like, this is not even my final form. The final form is going to be self-custody Bitcoin. And how you get there could be also through a bank. But the point is here that until then, banks can really help with adoption, because there is still so much money that's sitting on the sidelines that still believes that Bitcoin is a pyramid scheme, that this is a scam, that it's terrible for the environment, and all the thought that has been repeated for years. They still believe it, simply, not out of malice, not because they don't like it or they're against it. Simply, they just do not have a trusted signal, because, Bitcoin companies and crypto companies and all these, they don't perceive them. They don't even arrive at their radar. But it's now that it's on Wall Street, it's already a little bit more serious. Now that banks start offering it, it's a lot more serious. So they need this trust signal. This money is a little bit stubborn, and they will not be convinced by, Michael Saylor talking on Bitcoin stage. They will not be convinced by any of these things. They will only be convinced by traditional fiat world institutions. And that is the fact. And we actually need them if we want to win in the long term. And then once we have everybody in Bitcoin and all these institutions are into it, they cannot change it. They cannot stop it. They can make money out of it. They will blow themselves up, a lot of them. But ultimately, people will then understand that, all right, there is a better way to Bitcoin. So I'm going to leave my bank and I'm going to just do it myself.
Yeah, exactly.
And cut them out.
Yeah, or the bank conforms to how you should handle Bitcoin, and that I think will be glorious, actually, to see that. I also don't think, or I do think that when there are banks, or let's say financial institutions, that figure that out, that it's going to be easier when they just conform to what Bitcoin is, how it works, all the principles and values that emanate from it, that is actually their competitive advantage.
Yes.
And that is really why I call Bitcoin a mirror, is once you see that and once you start acting like that, it shows that you are different than these traditional fiat money minded financial institutions, because they are just so opposed, these values and principles, that it actually becomes easy to show how different you are, if that makes sense. So I agree, but I also think it takes time, right?
For sure, but I've been in the industry for now over 8 years, and to me it's crazy that you go to a Bitcoin conference and that bank's there on stage presenting that, we have politicians who are embracing Bitcoin. It's so crazy, because unless you have been around in those years, you don't understand just how different everything was, how the whole industry and Bitcoin was perceived compared to now. You can't understand it. Kids nowadays don't know the struggles we had to go through. So I actually find it, I find it positive, because to me it really feels like we have come a long way. We are winning, because this is what winning feels like. It's like you're changing your enemies into your allies, and they don't even know it. And then you can still walk away from them, because there is the whole self-custody aspect.
Yeah, fully agree. How I do want to touch upon Europe. I mean, we're both in Europe. Obviously, you're in Switzerland, which is a bit of a different part, right? You're not so bothered with the whole EU as I am.
I am based in Austria, so.
Oh well, yeah. So that's different.
Still bothered.
Yeah, still bothered. Yeah. I do think yesterday I had an interesting conversation about like how the whole American financial system is very, very different from the European financial system. Also, all the stuff with regulation and policy and stuff like that. So, although I do agree with what we just mentioned, I think in Europe it'll probably be slower than the rest of the world. In general, you have a front row experience. What are you seeing as kind of like the most common held myth about Bitcoin in Europe that you would like to bust with regard to adoption or its added value or whatever? Like, what is the main thing you're seeing where you're like, why is this a thing or still a thing?
I think in Europe so this is a very loaded question, and there is no simple answer to it. I think, especially when you compare the US and Europe, there's one very big significant difference, is that Americans from very young age, they are, by their parents, but also the institutions around them, really taught to invest money. Americans have a much more positive relationship with investing than Europeans do. Up until recently, Germany, which is the biggest economy in Europe, most of the millennial Germans, I think the majority of them had their money in a bank account. Europeans don't invest as much as Americans. So here the problem is, it's not even about sort of what is it about Bitcoin that there is FUD. It's more about they don't even know they first you need to talk to them about why you should invest your money. That should be the first step. If you can get over 50% of the Europeans, if you can convince them to invest their money, that already makes Bitcoin adoption much larger, because you cannot start talking to them about Bitcoin when they don't even know that they need to invest their money. Do you understand? Like, it's like you're putting the cart in front of the horse, in a way. So that's the first problem. And then what I honestly find is that it's just not having good information, and people only read headlines. So it happened to me recently where a friend, not a friend, but like an acquaintance, looked into Bitcoin and was very interested in it, but then they've done their own research, and then they came back to me saying that, I actually don't want to invest in Bitcoin. It's not good for the environment. I want to invest in something greener, or whatever the phrasing was. But I knew that, like, all right, so I know that you haven't done your research. You probably done a quick ChatGPT search, and the thing is that if you search for, give me the cons of Bitcoin, if you look for negativity, you will only find negativity online. So if you're looking for, like, what is wrong with Bitcoin, then of course you will find articles that talk about it being harmful for the environment, or that being a Ponzi scheme and all these sort of things, because that information is out there. So people are not really doing good enough research. And honestly, I do believe that the majority of the people are just, I don't want to say lazy, but I think there is a lack of interest in money, which I always find fascinating. It's something we use all the time. It's something that would help us to get what we want, whether it's a house or a car or whatever. Yet so few people spend time learning about it. It's such a paradox to me. It's like, you're not interested in this, and I find it fascinating. Why don't you look into Bitcoin? But the truth is, they don't look into ETFs either. They don't look into investing either. They just don't care. They use it, but they never question it, and they never want to, like, learn. So it's a very loaded question, and now I've given you a very loaded answer to it. But I think that would be the first one. Then, of course, obviously, you have lots of thought about Bitcoin. Like I already mentioned, the environment aspect, the Ponzi scheme aspect. I have recently, for the last few months, I really only focused on LinkedIn, where I post regularly about Bitcoin. I try to educate the LinkedIn crowds. And most of it is very positive. But then I would say every second post receives a person who is so ignorant to Bitcoin. Like, really, you can just tell from
with
the
strong
way,
opinions usually.
with very strong opinions, but also you can just see that they're arguing something that they have zero clue about, like really no clue at all. And this is, again, just comes down to lack of, I would say, trusted signal. Because yes, Relay or companies like Bitwise or Coinbase can post a lot and do lots of PR and pay some great research papers and stuff like that, but that will not convince these people. I do believe that these people will be the last ones to get convinced once it's everywhere. Once you go to your bank and the first product they push is Bitcoin. Once you go to your friends and they are already into Bitcoin, like, the last dominoes are very hard to be tipped over, but it will happen. So I think it's just needs time. And I think everybody, because once you really understand Bitcoin, there's really nothing that you can say about it that is in line with all the FUD that you can find right now. I told this to my friends as well. I have never met anybody who has put in, I would say, I don't know, maybe 10 to 15 hours of research into Bitcoin, who still held those views afterwards. You only really have this.
Yeah. Well, there are no informed critiques, right? Yeah, that sounds very arrogant, And also when you reply, I mean, I'm sometimes also in the LinkedIn trenches when you say, like, when you reply to someone and you say, like, I do this now, which is not really nice, but I say, like, do you think it's smart to have a anti-something argument and showing that you didn't even research it, right? Like, you don't understand it. And people are super triggered by that, right? When you say, like, well, you're arguing something that you don't understand, where I'm just thinking, like, this is probably one of the first things I learned in my career is just shut up about things you don't understand, right? Like it's very basic for me, and I agree with you. It's just when you are a headline reader or you're a high trust, institute trusting person, whatever, then you do think that Bitcoin burns the oceans and uses a whole swimming pool, of water, blah blah, like all these things. It is not an easy subject. It's easy to dismiss and very hard to learn. And I also don't blame people. I'm just also fascinated by that that lack of intellectual approach, because the problem that Bitcoin fixes, or the reason why it exists, is something that everyone has today, right? Like it is not. This is not a random thing, and I think that is also kind of like sad in the sense that, like I said, everyone has this problem today already. So don't blame me for sharing or talking about the solution, right? You should focus on the problem you have, and then maybe you'll come to Bitcoin or not. That doesn't really matter. I don't think we need to convince any other person, right? You need to do your own
and you
work.
shouldn't force it either. I think forcing it is a mistake, but also I think feeling, I would say being hostile towards it is also not good. I think the best you can do is just give them the time and be like, okay, that's your opinion, like the dude, that's just your opinion. And I think you just need to give them time. And again, the problem here is that it's just hard. It's the same reason why people don't work out. I recently read a stat and I couldn't believe it. So I'm a millennial, and apparently in I don't know if it was Europe or globally, but 50% of millennials don't do any physical activity when it comes to exercising, which is a staggering amount. It's a huge amount of people that don't actually do anything. But why don't they do it? Because it's hard. The same reason why people don't look into money and understand how they can improve their situation, because they think it's hard. Going to the gym is easy. You just need to walk there and then pick up the lightest weight and start lifting. And then over time, you will become better at it. Same with Bitcoin. It is very taunting to think about, I don't understand anything about this. It's so foreign to me. But actually, it just takes one podcast, listen to a conversation, or read a book. And you can Google, Bitcoin books for beginners. But people don't even often know, I think, how to just do this simple step, because they always look at the whole hill rather than thinking about the first step. So I think I have a lot of sympathy with people, and I don't force it anymore. At the start, when I was younger and I started in the industry, I talked about it all the time, why you should have Bitcoin, to all my friends. I don't do it for years now because I'm just like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to be the guy who only talks about Bitcoin. But if you ask me, I'm very happy to answer your questions. Just the other day, one of my closest friends says, he knows that I work in Bitcoin. And I always wondered why he doesn't ask me questions about it more. But he just asked me for a book. He asked me like, which book would you recommend that I should read? And I gave him the book and we're like, start with this. And I didn't say anything else. I didn't push it on him. I recommended The Internet of Money by Andreas Antonopoulos. I just like his approach a lot. I like his, I started with his YouTube videos back in the day. And I think he is a very good educator for people who are outside of the Bitcoin world. I think there are other books that are very popular that I would not recommend to newbies.
Okay. Like which one? What is too much?
I think the Bitcoin Standard is probably a bit too much for a newbie. I think it does a brilliant job in explaining Bitcoin, but it's like 30% of the book, and the other 70% is, I think, would off-put certain people. Talking about, how the music industry is broken, the art is terrible, and all these sort of things. I think people just really want to know about Bitcoin. They don't need to yet know about how the rest of the world is broken. They just want to understand, why should I bother about Bitcoin? And I think Andreas does a very good job, really good job.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like him too. Maybe one more question about Europe. So on one side, I wanted to ask you about the myth, but the other side, is there something you're seeing now, like a certain trend or a certain insight that you gained that you actually think the rest of the world is sleeping on with regard to Bitcoin in Europe?
Again, a controversial topic, I would say, or an opinion. I think it's the idea of regulation. I think regulation overall is seen as a very negative thing by Bitcoiners, and rightly so. But I think there's a different point of view if you see it as just a normal person, as a normal Bitcoiner, and somebody who works in a business, because you understand that actually regulation is needed for businesses. I think in Europe, compared to other countries and other regions, at least now we have this clarity. We know exactly what a company needs to do if you want to enter the Bitcoin world. And Bitcoin adoption happens through companies that sell Bitcoin and they provide Bitcoin services. Without it, we just talk. Without it, we just talk about Bitcoin, but there is no services. So it's very important. And I have a very bittersweet relationship when it comes to regulation, because this is point of view where, yes, it's all clear now, everybody knows what we need to do, so it's a level playing field and everybody is in clear now. That is a good thing. Now the bad thing is obviously just the fact that it exists in the first place, that regulation is there. So I try to have basically a neutral point of view when it comes to regulation, just think like it's the way it is. There is nothing we can do. Essentially, we cannot ignore regulation because then we would be out of business. And I think that some people often on like X would say like, oh, you're bootlicking and you're giving in to politicians. But it's like, but do you understand that then there is no business? Like you cannot just go and tell fuck you to the EU and to all the laws, because then you can maybe do it for a month or two, but then all the fines, and the potential jail sentences that you get is the company's finished. So again, it's the same thing as with the banks. You need to work within their playground and their rules, and then slowly change it. I do believe that the regulation that exists in Europe now, I would say maybe 20, 30 years from now, will be very different and much more friendlier. Because again, we will win. I do believe that like first you just need to get in, play by their rules, and that's what this regulation is for. We will play by your stupid rules, okay. But then what they don't realize is that we'll be changing them. The same thing happened with banks, and the Wall Street was laughing at Bitcoin. They were, all the big names. I think Warren Buffett called it rat poison. Jamie Dimon called it pet rocks. And now JP Morgan offers collateral, Bitcoin as a collateral if you want to take a loan. BlackRock was laughing at Bitcoin, and now they have the largest ETF, is a Bitcoin ETF. So we have won already, and we're changing it. And the same thing will happen with the politicians, in my opinion. It's just very frustrating. And I understand, if you're privacy conscious, that the KYC is an issue. But again, that is the rule of the game, and we have to follow the rule of the game until that rule changes. But that will only happen once we are there, and then we can sort of inflict change. Yeah. And I think it will happen, because if you think about it, more and more Bitcoiners will, enter the space. They will go into politics, perhaps. They will go into work for institutions. Bitcoiners will slowly be everywhere. And then that will change the landscape, and that will change the laws as well. Yeah. But again, this is a long-term game, and Bitcoin is all about long-term. Yeah. So why would it be different with all these other things?
So I think this is a good thing for people to think about, also with regard to their own time frame as Bitcoiners and their own conviction. Like, okay, that's also why I think is a big part of why I started the podcast. Is just like, I'm going to think about this for the rest of my life. I want to see how this plays out, and it's probably going to take the rest of my life to a certain degree that this is slowly changing, and I just want to see what happens. And that's kind of where I'm trying to go with my mind. It's like, okay, if I'm disappointed by how something is going, I just have to remind myself that this is probably the rest of my life that I'm going to pay attention to this, and it's going to take a long time before Bitcoin actually becomes what I think we all think it already is, but the rest of the world needs to catch up.
And I think it will happen, but also it's a journey, and there will be growing pains, and roadblocks along the way. It doesn't mean that that's where the journey stops. I'm against regulation. I would prefer if it doesn't exist. Relay would prefer if it wouldn't be around. Every company would prefer if there would be no regulation. But the fact is that there is, and you have to play with it. If you want to be in business, you have to do it. Also on a personal level, some people can afford and can do, sort of living on the edge of the system. They can go to El Salvador or some other country and be like, I'm just going to be living fully on Bitcoin. But these things become a lot more complex once you have a family, for example. Once you have children, the majority of the population will not move to El Salvador and live somewhere in South America just on Bitcoin. That will not happen. The most of the population will continue living their lives as they built it for themselves, but they want to use Bitcoin. Yes, they will have to right now, unfortunately, everywhere in Europe, KYC, and if you want to buy even more, then AML as well, and a bunch of other questions. It is not nice at all. But it's better than not to play the game. And like I said, I really think that a lot of things will change in the long run. I think the regulation around Bitcoin is going to be much less strict as it is now. I unfortunately believe that in the short term, it's probably going to become worse. If I would map out the timeline for Bitcoin when it comes to Europe or the Western democracies, I would say in the short term, probably very volatile. And I have not a lot of faith in institutions in the short term in terms of how friendly they will be with Bitcoin. But in the long term, I do believe that it's going to just basically win, because if something is just logical and it makes sense and it actually improves the world around us, it will eventually win. I think the great ideas always win. You can stop them. In the Middle Ages, the religion has tried to stop progress as much as they wanted, and they didn't succeed, because all they could do is slow it down. And I think great ideas cannot be stopped. They can be slowed down, but eventually they will always break through. Now, the question is how long it's going to take. But again, we as Bitcoiners, we play the long game. And I think that's something we need to understand. So currently, it's very frustrating. We need to play by certain rules, and we're going to do it. But in the long term, I think, just like with the banks and everything else, we are going to infiltrate the system and then change it.
Yeah. All right. Two questions to wrap it up. What is the most surprising thing that you've learned about yourself going through this entire Bitcoin journey? How do you think that you personally changed after going through this arc?
Oh man, just the fact that I work in Bitcoin. If you would have met me just after high school, before going to uni, or even after graduating from uni, and you would tell me that I would be working in finance, which I consider Bitcoin being part of the financial world, I would tell you that you're crazy, because I had zero interest. I cared about movies. All my dream was to work in the movie industry, which I did. But then I realized that actually it's not a good job. But I never thought that I would be working in money, that I would be interested in money, that I would enjoy talking about money. That is the biggest surprise to me. And basically just tells me that even in the future, there are still great things waiting for you that you might not even understand yet, that you would be into or that you want them. And that's why I think it's just great. There's always something to look forward to, because right now you cannot see something great in the future, but you will eventually evolve into it, or circumstance will happen and something great will come your way. I think that's great. I honestly, I didn't think that I would be here 20 years ago.
Yeah, awesome. I agree. I think it's just really interesting what this does to you, like the kind of like making the decision also to think for yourself?
Yeah.
Which I think is the first decision you make when you decide to learn about Bitcoin, and then also what kind of doors it opens to, just your whole perception of the world and how you operate and thinking about your future and all these things. So I think that's really, really great. So thanks for sharing that.
I think, it enables freedom in so many things, and the concept of self-custody also somehow applies to yourself, where you realize that I am responsible for myself and my own happiness. So I will take the effort to get fitter, to take care of my health, to take care of my family's health, to protect them. And you really start thinking more independently because of Bitcoin, which I think is great. So there is lots of benefits you get once you get into Bitcoin. But for me, just the fact that I'm here compared to the person I was is probably the biggest surprise.
Yeah. All right, last question. And I ask everyone the same question. Maybe you just answered it, actually. But what is a core belief that you will never let go of?
Core belief? Oh, that is a very good question. When it comes to Bitcoin or just overall?
Overall, whatever you want.
I think is that hard work always pays off. I think everything worth having is difficult to get to, but it's always worth it. Whether it's a relationship, whether it's building a company, building a house, getting fit, all this takes effort and work, but it's always worth it. The bad thing is to avoid hardship, I think, because then you don't grow. And even if it's hardship in a negative sense, I think it still gives us something. Like it still builds character, builds resilience, and every heartbreak you ever had, I think, made you a better person and made your current relationship stronger. Every time you fell and you got up, that made you more confident. So it's like hardship, I think, is part of life, and we should embrace it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing, and thanks for sharing your story and what you're building. And really enjoyed it. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bram. It was great to talk to you.
Thanks, man. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, please like this video if you want to help shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, and subscribe to my channel to stay connected. I hope to see you for a next episode. Bye.